Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to NBAV, the NBA Avenue podcast. And what we're going to do today, since not a lot of new news, or not a lot of news, has come out about new free agent signings. All we really have is, Donovan Mitchell signed a 3-year extension. He's sort of getting on the fast track to when he can sign his real Supermax deal, so he's going to be staying put in Cleveland for another couple of years. And on the previous podcast, we hit basically every free agent going all the way up to the extension for Jason Tatum. The only one that I believe we missed was Nick Claxton signed a 4-year, $100 million deal with Brooklyn a while back, or at least they reported it a while back. Okay, kind of a ho-hum. They're keeping a guy because they can afford to keep him because they already traded away Mikal Bridges. So they're going to hold on to Claxton until somebody can offer a good deal and wrestle him away from them. And outside of that, we didn't really miss out on too much else. Let's see, were there any newer deals? It doesn't appear that there were. There was James Wiseman has signed a 2-year deal to go to the Indiana Pacers, and we presume that's going to be some sort of a minimum deal. It's not going to be for very much, and he's going to be behind a whole slew of guys there in the rotation. So what we're going to do now is we have the two best teams, one team in the East and one team in the West. To the East, we know it's the defending champs, the Boston Celtics, who have been on a rampage, re-signing and extending, I shouldn't say re-signing because they weren't free agents, but extending all of their key guys, their entire championship core. They did it with Brown last year, they did it with Tatum, they just did it with Drew Holiday not too long ago, and they did it with Derek White. And then we have the new power player in the Western Conference, a team that made it pretty far, ultimately came up short against Dallas. It was a good series, but didn't go to 7 games. So that is going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder, and now they've made a couple of picture-perfect moves and a couple of extensions as well, a couple of re-signing guys who I guess were restricted. And let's take a look at these two rosters, and let's try to see who has the better roster. This is really the question heading into the NBA season as of now, and there's still moves to be made. But right now, let's say if things stayed this way, which roster would be the better roster? We have, starting with the Celtics, let's take the best players at the top, right? We have Jason Tatum. I know that Jaylen Brown is sort of a 1B, and Jaylen Brown is sort of a 1B, and Jason Tatum is the 1A. So let's consider Jason Tatum as their best guy. If you want to compare that to the Thunder, SGA, Gilgeous-Alexander, is the better player. Now you can say, hey, Gilgeous-Alexander doesn't have the championship experience. Tatum already won a finals, and he also made it to another final, and that is going to be something that SGA doesn't have, and when he gets there, it's going to be a new experience for him, so that should be advantage to Tatum. I don't see it that way, because Gilgeous-Alexander was one of the best playoff performers in the entire league this past season. You can make a case that perhaps he was the best, better than anyone. You can make that case. So I don't see him as being the kind of guy who's going to be swayed. He was a big game player going all the way back to his season in college where he was great in the tournament and he was great at the end of close games. So I don't see that being a problem for him whatsoever. I would give the clear edge to Gilgeous-Alexander as the number 1 player between the Thunder and the Celtics. So I would say SGA has an advantage over Jason Tatum. And if you want to continue going down the line, the second best player on each team would be Jaylen Brown from the Celtics, and it would be Jalen Williams, J-Dub, from the Thunder. Now, I think that J-Dub certainly has a lot of time on his side, and he could improve to the level of Jaylen Brown, but right now I would give the slight advantage to Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown has the championship experience and pedigree. He plays the defense. He does everything. He's very consistent. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, really is a similar type of player to Jaylen Brown. He's just a little bit younger. And whereas we know how good Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be in the big game, we don't per se know that to the same extent with J-Dub. We haven't seen it yet. And we've seen games in the playoffs where J-Dub was quieter, and we've seen games where he was more pronounced. We've seen games where he was not as good in the first 3 quarters and came alive in the fourth quarter. Whereas Jaylen Brown is sort of that very consistent product no matter what. So I would say In terms of the best player, we're going to give the advantage to the Thunder. In terms of the second best player, we're going to give the advantage to the Celtics. Then, when you go to the third best player on the Celtics, I would say you're going to have to call that Drew Holiday, because Porzingis doesn't quite give you that same consistency, considering he's injured a lot of the time. So if you want to say third most important player on the team, I would go Drew Holiday as the third. And then if you want to go on the Thunder, it's going to be kind of questionable as to who that third guy is. We can consider it, for the sake of this exercise, we can say, hey, maybe it's going to be Dort. Let's compare Drew Holiday to Dort. They kind of have the same role, 3 and D sort of players. Drew Holiday has the edge. So we can give Drew Holiday the edge there. And then the next most important guy in the Celtics is going to be Derek White. And you're going to have to compare him to, perhaps in this upcoming year, what's going to be Alex Caruso. Very similar type players, but I would say if you take Drew Holiday and Derek White on one side of the scale, and you put Dort and Caruso on the other side, I think Dort and Caruso, that tandem could compete with Holiday and Derek White, but I wouldn't give them the edge. I'd say that it's a clear advantage for the Celtics. So then you have what you have with the big men, right? You have the Porzingis and Al Horford. Right, Porzingis, where he's going to be viewed as exactly what he was this past season. He's not going to be healthy for too much of it, but when he's out there, he's going to be a key contributor that raises their ceiling tremendously. I know that he was healthy for a lot of the regular season, but it's most likely going to be the same sort of story. He's going to come off another surgery, and he's going to be a guy who is just going to continue to be more of the same, where you're going to hope that he's healthy. You pray that he's healthy. And when he is healthy, their team is going to be a juggernaut, nearly unbeatable. But he's not going to be there for quite as much. And then you have Al Horford, who has given all indications he's returning this season. He's not going to retire. And he feels like he has more good basketball left in him. And I believe him. I don't think that the Celtics rely on him to the extent that they did a couple of seasons ago. And therefore, Al Horford is still a good player. Does he get worse with each passing year? Sure, but the drop-off to this point hasn't been steep. He's just been a steady decline, but it's very slow. It's kind of like, somebody who has I don't want to compare it like this, but it's a good comparison. It's like to somebody who has a very slow degenerative disease, where it's eventually going to take them out of the league, but to this point, it's very, very, very slow. Al Horford is still a key contributor to this Celtics team. Then on the other side with the Thunder, we're going to have the tandem of Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. And this is really interesting because Chet Holmgren, he missed time in his first season, and they kind of just sat him out purposely. And then when he came back for year 2, he played the entire year, and he was healthy for the entire year. And then you have Hartenstein, a very healthy player. So you're going to have age, certainly on the side of the Thunder, and you're going to have the potential ceiling maybe on the side of Porzingis. Porzingis is pretty incredible when he's out there for the Celtics. But the question is, who do you give the advantage to between the big men? Let's call them the Twin Towers on each side. You have Porzingis and Horford versus Hartenstein and Holmgren. I think that's sort of up in the air. I think that Holmgren can, for his career, end up being the best of all of these guys. But will we see it this coming season, or is it going to be a steady work in progress? There are times when Holmgren is really, really good, and there are times where he shows his youth, and he still is very thin. He's going to get bigger and stronger, and that's why they brought in Hartenstein, because Hartenstein's a great compliment to him. I think I would give a slight edge to the Oklahoma City Thunder for the tandem, because they're both going to be out there, whereas we don't really know. Horford is aging. Porzingis is not as reliable that he's going to be on the court. I would say you got to give the slight advantage to the Thunder overall. Then we're going to take a look at who else on the Celtics is a really, really key contributor that we could say separates himself from the pack. We have left, I'm only going to name like guys who are sort of key. We have Peyton Pritchard, we have O'Shea Brissett, Sam Hauser, we have Luke Cornett, right? We have Cornett, who I forgot to put on the list, but doing this in real time, I am remembering it because, of course, Cornette was another guy who they brought back, and he's a key part of this team, certainly in the regular season. So you're gonna have Pritchard, Cornette, Hauser, Brissett, and then we'll throw Jordan Walsh in there as an 11th player in this exercise. Jordan Walsh is certainly a guy who looks like he's going to slowly take on more and more of a role with the Celtics. And considering that they already won a title at the end of ball games that are out of reach, they're probably going to want Jordan Walsh to play when they're blowing teams out or if they ever get blown out. So we can keep him in this exercise. So let's look at those players again. It's Pritchard, Hauser, Cornette, Brissett, and Walsh. There's no real incredible player there who I think you can say is above the pack. Pritchard and Hauser and Cornette are kind of the guys there. Whereas if you look on the Thunder side, I think it's a clear difference that Isaiah Joe is better than all those guys. Because Joe can defend a little bit, and his three-point shooting is far and away better than anybody that the Celtics have. He's a pure sniper. And a guy like that in this league, like a Bogdan Bogdanovic over in Atlanta, like a young Klay Thompson, guys who can shoot like an older Ray Allen, those guys in today's NBA are so valuable. Maybe think of a young Nick Batum, the guys who really were just incredibly efficient three-point shooters to the point where I would call Isaiah Joe a sniper. I think he's a level above. And then the Thunder still have Cason Wallace, who you can make a case is more impactful than Pritchard or Hauser. And then you have Aaron Wiggins, and then you have the other Jalen Williams. And then I would say the last guy, the 11th man for the Thunder, I would say in the same fashion that we're throwing Jordan Walsh into this exercise for the Celtics, I would say you could throw Ousmane Dieng in there, who's played really well for the Thunder in the G League, and I think he's sort of the equivalent of Jordan Walsh for the Celtics. You have Ousmane Dieng, who can maybe be the backup point guard of the future in a couple of years, or maybe even this year. Maybe they'll start him and try to throw him into that garbage time role, the same way the Celtics will throw Jordan Walsh into that garbage time role. So you sort of have what I would say, in terms of the top player, you have a clear advantage for Gilgeous-Alexander. If you go down the line of the next few guys, the advantage is going to be on the Celtics. That's where you have Jaylen Brown versus J-Dub, and where you have Holiday and Derek White versus Caruso and Dort. I would say that's clear in the Celtics. So maybe we call it even up to that point, somewhat even. And then if you go for the big men, I would say a slight advantage, Holmgren and Hartenstein versus Porzingis and Horford. You might say I'm crazy, but Porzingis, you really can't rely on him. And if the Celtics don't manage to bring in another big man and they really just go with Cornette, Porzingis, and Horford, and then on the other side it's Holmgren and Hartenstein, I do think Holmgren and Hartenstein, in terms of the health and the impact, have a little bit more there, a slight advantage. Then I think the advantage goes Isaiah Joe. Then you have kind of the rest of the roster with Pritchard, Hauser, Brissett, Cornette, Walsh. And on the Thunder side, you have Cason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, Jalen Williams, Ousmane Dieng. And I think you're maybe even overall going to say that the Thunder have a all-around better roster than the Celtics. I think it comes down to Horford is getting a little bit older. And Porzingis is less reliable that he's going to actually be on the court. And then if you look on the Thunder side, the negative is Holmgren is still getting better. He's not where he needs to be yet. Hartenstein is there. I think Hartenstein is there right now, and he's going to be a key reason why the Thunder might be a better team than the Celtics. It's going to be on the Celtics side, you have, we won the title. How much are our aging and our unhealthy players going to continue to get less healthy over time and continue to age? Whereas for the Thunder, it's we haven't yet been to the finals. We haven't yet had the championship pedigree. We haven't won a finals. We haven't been to a finals. We haven't been to a conference finals. And our players are young and they're still getting better. Are they there now? I think if you do this as an exercise over the next 4 seasons, the Thunder are clearly the best team in the NBA. If you say here and now, who's the best roster? I still think it's a question. I wouldn't give the mantle 100% to the Celtics. I think for this upcoming year, the key is going to be how good are Caruso and Dort relative to Holiday and Derek White on the Celtics side. I think that's kind of going to be it, and it's going to be how healthy is Porzingis relative to the health of Holmgren and Hartenstein, and how much does Horford keep the player that he was in the last few seasons to the player that he's going to be in this upcoming season. Altogether, I'm going to say a slight advantage to the Thunder at this point, but maybe we'll revisit this, 25 games in or 15, 20 games into the season, and we'll see which team really is the best roster in the NBA. We're going to continue to bring you the up-to-date news of all the free agent signings. We'll review them in real time, and we'll talk about it and say whether the deals were good or whether the deals were bad. I'm just trying to pull up right now and see. There's just DeMar DeRozan interest out there. It doesn't seem like anybody has made a signing since the James Wiseman signing to the Pacers. So, as always, we're your source for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.